Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Part 1, Rock Bottom. My name is Zoe Mitchell, and on the morning of my 25th birthday, I sat on the floor of a studio apartment in Atlanta, Georgia, and counted the money in my wallet, $11.43. That was everything I had, not just in my wallet, in the world. My checking account had a negative balance. My credit card was maxed out. My student loan payments were 3 months overdue. My landlord had slid a notice under my door the night before, the third one that month. It was my birthday. Nobody called except my mom, who sang happy birthday and asked if I was okay. I said yes, I was not okay. I sat on that floor for a long time. The apartment was small, barely 400 square feet, a bed, a couch that I had found on the sidewalk, a kitchen the size of a closet, and one window that looked out at the wall of the building next door. I had a poster of Paris on the wall that I had bought at a yard sale for 50 cents because I thought it would make the place feel bigger. It didn't. I was 25 years old. I had a college degree, I had worked hard my entire life, and I had $11.43 to my name. I remember thinking, sitting there on that floor with my back against the couch and my wallet in my lap, that something had gone very wrong. Not in the dramatic, obvious way that things go wrong in movies, in the slow, quiet, grinding way that things go wrong in real life. One bad decision leading to another, one missed opportunity after another, 1 month of just getting by turning into 2, then 6, then 3 years. I was not stupid. I was not lazy. I had simply never been taught how money worked, and nobody had ever told me that was a thing you needed to learn. That morning, on the floor, on my birthday, with $11, I made a decision that changed everything. Part 2, how I got there. Let me go back, because nobody ends up broke at 25 by accident. There is always a story behind the number. I grew up in a small town called Dalton, Georgia, about 90 miles north of Atlanta. My parents were good people who worked hard and never had much. My dad drove trucks, my mom worked at a hair salon. They paid their bills, kept food on the table, and loved us the best they could. But money was always tight, always a source of stress, always something we did not talk about openly except to say we can't afford that. I learned 3 things about money growing up. It was hard to get, easy to lose, and not something people like us were supposed to have a lot of. That last belief, people like us, was the most dangerous one. I carried it into adulthood without even knowing it was there. I went to Georgia State University on a partial scholarship and student loans. I studied marketing because I liked the idea of it, the creativity, the strategy, the way good marketing could make people feel something. I graduated at 22 with a degree, $40,000 in debt, and no real plan. I got a job at a mid-sized marketing agency in Atlanta. The salary was $38,000 a year. In Atlanta, in your 20s, that is not enough. Not after rent and student loans and car insurance and groceries and all the small costs of being alive that nobody warns you about. I spent 3 years at that job, working hard, getting small raises, spending everything I made and a little more. I had no savings, no investments, no financial plan. I was running on a treadmill, moving fast, going nowhere. By 25, the treadmill had stopped, and I was on the floor. Part 3, the worst night. 3 days after my birthday, the landlord knocked on my door. His name was Mr. Yates. He was a short man in his 60s who wore the same gray cardigan every time I saw him. He was not cruel. He was just a man who needed his rent paid. "Mr. Mitchell, we need to talk about your balance." I owed him 2 months of rent, $1,400. I didn't have $14, let alone $1,400. I told him I needed 2 more weeks. He looked at me with tired, patient eyes, the eyes of a man who had heard this before, and said he could give me 1 week. After that, he would have to start the eviction process. I closed the door and stood in the middle of my tiny apartment and felt something I had never felt before. Not sadness, something colder, something that felt like the ground disappearing under my feet. I called my mom. She cried. She said she wished she could help, but they barely had enough themselves. I told her it was okay. I told her not to worry. I called my college friend Priya, the most financially stable person I knew. She lent me $500 without hesitation. I cried in the phone and she said, "Pay me back whenever, just get stable." I called my bank and begged them to waive the overdraft fees. They waived 2 of the 4. I sold my laptop on Facebook Marketplace for $200 and used my phone for everything after that. I scraped together enough to pay 1 month's rent and buy groceries for 2 weeks. I was still in the hole, but I was not on the street. That night, lying on my sidewalk couch in the dark, I made myself a promise. Not a vague, hopeful kind of promise, a specific, serious, no-going-back kind of promise. I will never feel this way again. I will figure out money. I will build something real. I will not spend the rest of my life afraid of my own bank account. Part 4. The Decision. The next morning, I woke up early. I made coffee, the cheap store brand kind I'd been buying for months, and I sat at my small kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. I wrote at the top of the page, "Why am I broke?" Not as a question to feel bad about, as a question to actually answer, honestly, without making excuses. I wrote for an hour. When I was done, I had a list of truths that were uncomfortable but clear. I had never made a budget. I had never tracked my spending. I had never saved anything consistently. I had never learned how investing worked. I spent money to feel better when I was stressed. Clothes, takeout, subscriptions I forgot to cancel. I had a degree in marketing and zero understanding of personal finance. I had been earning money for 3 years and had nothing to show for it. None of these things made me a bad person. They made me a person who had never been taught. I slipped the page. At the top, I wrote, "What am I going to do about it?" I didn't have all the answers yet, but I had one clear starting point. I needed to learn. Before I could earn more, I needed to understand what I already had. Before I could build wealth, I needed to understand why I kept losing it. I went to the Atlanta Public Library that afternoon because I had sold my laptop and the library had free computers, and I spent 4 hours reading everything I could find about personal finance, budgeting, and building income from scratch. I left the library at closing time with 3 books under my arm, a notebook full of notes, and something I had not felt in a long time: hope. Real, specific, actionable hope. Part 5. Learning about money. For the next 3 months, I became a student of money. I kept my job at the marketing agency. I needed the income, even if it wasn't enough. But every spare hour went to learning. Library computers, free YouTube videos, podcasts I listened to on my commute, books I checked out and read on my lunch break. I learned things that felt so basic I was almost embarrassed I didn't know them. That every dollar needed a job, a category, a purpose, a direction. That the most important financial habit was not earning more, but spending less than you earned and doing it consistently. That compound interest, the way money grows on top of itself over time, was the most powerful force in personal finance, and almost nobody used it in their 20s because almost nobody taught it. I learned about the difference between assets and liabilities. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. Most people spend their whole lives buying liabilities, cars, subscriptions, things, and call it living. Real wealth comes from building assets. I made a budget for the first time in my life, a real one, not a rough estimate in my head, but a written plan, every dollar accounted for. I found $400 a month I had been wasting on things I didn't need or even remember buying. I cut everything non-essential. Cable, gone. 2 streaming services, gone. Eating out, down to twice a month. Coffee shops replaced with home coffee. It was not glamorous. Some days it was genuinely hard, but I had a number every month that I was saving. A small number at first, but a real one. And something about having a real number, even a small one, felt completely different from having nothing. Part 6. The First Business. 4 months after my birthday on the floor, I started my first business. It was not glamorous. It was not the kind of business that gets written up in Forbes or featured on Instagram. It was a freelance social media management service. I offered to run the social media accounts of small local businesses in Atlanta for a monthly fee. I had the skills from my marketing degree and 3 years of agency work. I understood content strategy, audience growth, engagement. What I had never done was sell those skills directly to clients instead of through an employer. I made a simple one-page website on a free platform. I wrote a short email pitch. I sent it to 30 small businesses in Atlanta, restaurants, salons, fitness studios, boutiques that I could see had weak or inactive social media presence. 28 did not reply. One replied and said no thank you. One replied and said yes. Her name was Diana. She owned a small florist shop in Midtown called Bloom & Kano. She was paying nothing for social media and getting nothing from it. She agreed to pay me $300 a month to manage her Instagram and Facebook. $300. Not life-changing, but it was mine. Earned not by trading hours for a salary, but by providing a service I owned. That distinction felt enormous. I worked harder for Diana than I had ever worked for any employer. I photographed her flowers on my phone. I wrote captions that told stories. I engaged with her followers every single day. Within 60 days, her Instagram following had tripled, and she was getting new customers who said they had found her online. Diana referred me to 2 other business owners. They both said yes. 6 months in, I had 5 clients and $1,500 a month in freelance income on top of my salary. The treadmill had stopped. I had stepped off it, and I was finally moving somewhere. Part 8. Working harder than ever. Let me be honest with you about something. The next 2 years were not easy. They were the hardest working years of my life. I kept my full-time job at the agency. I needed the steady income and health insurance while my freelance business grew. So I worked my regular 9 to 5, then came home and worked on my clients from 6 until 10 or 11 at night. Weekends were not days off. They were catch-up days, content creation days, strategy days. I slept 6 hours a night. I said no to most social invitations. My apartment was still small, and I still drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a crack in the windshield that I kept telling myself I would fix. I put every dollar of freelance income, after taxes, into 3 places: paying off debt, building a small emergency fund, and reinvesting in the business. Some people would call this sacrifice. I called it investment because I understood something now that I hadn't understood at 22. Temporary discomfort for long-term gain is not suffering, it is strategy. By the end of my first year of freelancing, I had paid off one of my 2 credit cards. I had a $1,000 emergency fund, the first savings I had ever had in my adult life. I had 8 clients and was making $3,000 a month in freelance income. By the end of year 2, I had paid off all my credit card debt. I had quit my agency job and gone full-time with my own business. I had 17 clients and was making $7,000 a month. $7,000 a month! 2 years earlier, I had been counting coins on a studio apartment floor. I did not feel rich, not yet, but I felt something better than rich. I felt in control. Part 8. The people who laughed. Not everyone was supportive. I want to talk about that because the stories that only show the wins are not honest. When I told people I was starting a freelance business, some of them laughed. Not mean laughter, just the quiet, doubtful kind. The kind that says, "That's cute, but it won't work." A coworker at the agency, a man named Bragg, who had worked there for 11 years and seemed vaguely bitter about it, told me that freelancing was unstable and that I would be back at a desk job within 6 months. A family member asked why I was playing around with Instagram instead of getting a real job with benefits. An old college friend told me I admired my courage, but privately thought I was being naive. She told me this later, after I had succeeded, with the specific kind of embarrassed honesty that comes after being wrong about someone. I heard all these things. I want to be clear. They hurt. Not devastatingly, but they landed, because when you're already uncertain, someone else's doubt can feel like confirmation of your own fear. What kept me going was not ignoring those voices. It was having something stronger to hold on to, my numbers. Every month, I looked at my spreadsheet. Every month, the numbers went up. The numbers did not have opinions. The numbers simply showed what was true. I learned to let results speak instead of arguments. I stopped trying to convince people that my path was valid. I just kept walking it, and eventually the people who had doubted me either went quiet or came around. Greg, by the way, is still at the agency. I heard he got a small raise last year. Part 9, the first big win. 18 months into running my business full-time, I got my first big client. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She owned a chain of 4 wellness studios in Atlanta, yoga, Pilates, meditation classes. She had heard about me through one of my existing clients and reached out directly. We met at a coffee shop in Buckhead. She was sharp, direct, and clearly busy. She had been through 2 social media agencies and was unhappy with both. She wanted results, not reports. She wanted someone who understood her brand and could make it grow. I had prepared for 3 days for that meeting. I knew her business inside and out, her competitors, her audience, her content gaps, her missed opportunities. I came with a specific plan, real data, and honest projections. She listened for 40 minutes. Then she said, "What's your rate?" I had been charging small businesses $300 to $500 a month. I had been thinking about raising my rates. This was the moment. I took a breath and said, "For 4 locations with full content strategy and management, $4,000 a month." Silence. 3 seconds that felt like 30. Then Vanessa said, "That's fair. Let's start next month." I drove home from that coffee shop gripping my steering wheel and trying not to scream. $4,000 a month from one client, more than I had made in a single month at the agency, from one client. I called Priya, the friend who had lent me $500 on my worst night, and told her. She screamed for both of us. Part 10, Scaling Up. Landing Vanessa as a client changed everything, not just financially, but mentally. It proved something to me that I had suspected but not yet fully believed. I was worth more than I had been charging. My skills were real, my results were real, and the market would pay for real results. I raised my rates across the board. I lost 2 small clients who couldn't match the new pricing. I replaced them with 3 larger ones within 2 months. I hired my first contractor, a graphic designer named Keisha who did beautiful work and was looking for freelance projects. Having Keisha meant I could take on more clients without working more hours. I was beginning to understand one of the most important lessons in business. Your income does not have to be limited by your time. I started building systems, templates for content calendars, standard processes for onboarding new clients, clear contracts that protected both sides. I read books about scaling a service business. I took an online course about agency growth. I invested in my own education the way I had once spent money on things I didn't need. I also started investing financially for the first time. I opened a Roth IRA, a retirement account with tax advantages, and put in the maximum allowed each year. I started buying index funds with a small but consistent amount every month. Not enough to feel rich, but enough to start building the asset side of my life. By my 28th birthday, I had a team of 3 contractors, 22 clients, and a monthly revenue of $22,000. After expenses and taxes, I was taking home about $13,000 a month. I moved into a real apartment, 2 bedrooms, in-unit laundry, a kitchen with more than 2 burners. I bought a new car, not flashy, just reliable. I paid back Priya with interest. She refused the interest. I insisted.
Part 11, the setback. In the spring of my 28th year, I lost my 3 biggest clients in the space of 6 weeks. Not because of anything I had done wrong. Vanessa closed 2 of her studios due to a lease dispute with her landlord. Another large client was acquired by a national company that had an in-house marketing team. A third client, a restaurant group I had worked with for a year, went out of business entirely. In 6 weeks, I went from $22,000 a month in revenue to $11,000. I remember sitting at my desk staring at my updated spreadsheet. The numbers had gone the wrong direction for the first time in 3 years. Not back to rock bottom. I had savings now. I had reserves. I was not counting coins, but backward. And backward felt terrifying even when you had a cushion, because I knew how fast backward could become catastrophic. I'd lived that before. The voice came back, the old one. See, it wasn't real. It was luck. You got comfortable and now it's falling apart. I let the voice speak for one afternoon. I gave it that much. Then I closed the spreadsheet. I opened a new document and I wrote at the top, "What do I do now?" because that was the real question. Not why did this happen? Not is this the end? Just what do I do now? I had been here before, not exactly here, but in the spirit of here, on a floor with nothing, and I had gotten up then. I could get up now. Part 12, the comeback. I did 3 things in the week after the setback. First, I reached out to every past client I'd worked with, not to beg for business, but to check in genuinely. How are things going? Is there anything I can help with? 3 of them came back with small projects, not enough to replace what I had lost, but enough to show that relationships I had built were still real and still valuable. Second, I pivoted my offer. Instead of only providing done-for-you social media management, I created a consulting package. I would teach small business owners and their teams how to do their own social media through monthly coaching calls and a resource library. Lower price point, lower time commitment from me, and something I could sell to businesses who couldn't afford full management. Within 30 days, I had sold 12 consulting packages at $500 each, $6,000 in new revenue from a service that hadn't existed a month ago. Third, I started a newsletter. I had been building a reputation quietly in Atlanta's small business community. I decided to make that reputation work harder. I sent a weekly email about social media strategy and small business growth. Honest, specific, actionable. No fluff, just things that worked. Within 3 months, the newsletter had 4,000 subscribers. Within 6 months, it had 12,000. Sponsors started reaching out. A course idea started forming in my mind. By the end of that year, my 29th, my revenue had not just recovered, it had grown. I was making more than I had before the setback, with a more diversified business that was less vulnerable to losing any single client. The setback had not broken me, it had built me. Part 13, the morning I hit $1 million. It happened on a Tuesday morning in October. I was 30 years and 4 months old. I was sitting at my desk with my coffee, good coffee now, not store brand, checking my financial dashboard. I had started tracking net worth the year before, the sum of all my assets minus all my debts, business value, savings, investments, retirement accounts, minus the remaining student loan balance. I looked at the number. $1,012,000. I sat very still for a moment. Then I refreshed the page. Same number. I opened my investment account separately and checked. I opened my business valuation estimate. I added everything manually on a piece of paper, the way my dad used to balance his checkbook at the kitchen table. Same number. Over $1 million. I did not scream, I did not cry. I sat there very quietly with my coffee and the Tuesday morning sounds of Atlanta outside my window. Traffic, a distant siren, birds, and I felt something I had not expected. Gratitude. Deep, quiet, almost overwhelming gratitude. Not for the money itself, though the money was real and meaningful and represented freedom in a way that people who have been truly broke understand better than anyone, but for the distance, for how far this Tuesday morning was from that birthday floor 5 years ago, for $11.43 and a promise I made to myself and actually kept. I called my mom. She cried. My dad got on the phone and said, "That's my girl." 4 words from a man who didn't say much. They meant everything. Part 14, what money taught me. I want to tell you what I actually learned, not the inspirational version, the real version. Money is not the goal. I know that sounds strange coming from a story about becoming a millionaire, but it is true. Money is a tool. The goal is freedom, the freedom to choose how you spend your time, who you work with, where you live, what risks you take. Money is what buys that freedom, but the freedom is the point, not the number. Wealth is built slowly and lost quickly. The 5 years from broke to millionaire felt fast in the telling. They were not fast in the living. They were 5 years of consistent, unglamorous daily decisions, choosing to save when spending felt better, choosing to work when resting felt easier, choosing to invest in growth when comfort felt safer. Every single day, small choices in the right direction. Most people are not broke because they earn too little. They are broke because nobody ever taught them how money works. This is not a character flaw. It is a gap in education, one that falls hardest on people from lower income families who never saw wealth modeled at home and grew up believing, as I did, that money was something other kinds of people had.
That belief, people like us don't have money, is the most expensive thing I ever owned. Letting go of it was worth more than any client I ever landed. And finally, the people who laugh at your dream are not your audience. Build anyway. Show up anyway. Let the results do the talking. The world responds to evidence, not arguments. Part 15. The Real Wealth. Last month, I drove back to Dalton, Georgia, the small town where I grew up, for my parents' anniversary. My dad's truck was in the driveway. My mom's car was there, too. The house looked the same as it always had, small, well-kept. The garden my mom tended carefully in the front yard. The kind of house where everything was clean because everything was taken care of, because that was what people like my parents did. They took care of what they had. At dinner, my mom asked about the business. I told her it was going well. My dad asked if I was saving enough. I said, "Yes, Dad, more than enough." He nodded and went back to eating. That was approval in his language. After dinner, I sat on the back porch with my mom. She had a glass of sweet tea. I had water. The Georgia evening was warm and full of crickets, the same crickets I had grown up hearing, the same sky, the same dark fields stretching out past the backyard fence. My mom said, "I worry about you sometimes, working so hard. Are you happy?" I thought about the question honestly, not the automatic "yes, Mom, I'm fine" answer, the real answer. "Yeah," I said, "I really am. Not because of the money, because of what I built, because every morning I wake up and I'm doing something that's mine, something I made from nothing." She reached over and squeezed my hand. I thought about the floor, the $11, the sidewalk couch, Mr. Yates at the door, Pria's $500 and the word "whenever," the library computers and the legal pad, and the promise I made to myself on the worst night. I thought about Diana's flowers and Vanessa's yoga studios and the newsletter and the setback and the Tuesday morning with the coffee and the number on the screen. And I thought about this. The money was real, the freedom was real, but the realest thing, the thing that no number on any screen could fully capture, was knowing what I was made of, knowing I had been at the bottom and chosen to climb, knowing that when everything fell apart, I asked, "What do I do now?" instead of "Why is this happening to me?" That knowledge, that specific, earned, bone-deep knowledge of your own capability, is the wealth that cannot be lost. Not in a market crash, not in a bad quarter, not in any setback the world can throw at you. It lives in you, and once you have it, it is yours forever. If you are sitting somewhere right now feeling like I felt on that floor, broke and scared and wondering how things got this bad, I want you to hear this. This is not the end of your story. This is the floor, and the floor is where everything real begins. Get up, learn, start small, stay consistent, be patient with yourself and ruthless with your habits, and never ever believe that people like you can't build wealth, because people like you are exactly the ones who do. Lesson of the story: wealth is not built overnight, and it is not built by luck. It is built by learning what you were never taught, making consistent small decisions every single day, and refusing to let anyone, including yourself, convince you that financial freedom is for other people. Start where you are, use what you have, build what you can. The floor is just the beginning.